She stood naked in the darkness, waiting for the gas that never came. Beside her, strangers breathed and trembled. Above them, the nozzles remained silent. And Gena Goldfinger, 21 years old, made a promise to the God she wasn't sure still listened. If she survived, she would tell. The winter of 1944 in occupied Poland was brutal, but the cold inside the stone building was something else entirely, a cold that came not from the air but from the knowledge of what this room was built to do. Gena pressed her back against the wall, feeling the rough concrete through skin that had long since stopped shivering. Around her, other women wept, prayed, or simply stared. Mothers held daughters, strangers held hands, and they waited. 20 minutes passed, then 30. The silence was its own form of torture, the anticipation of death more agonizing than death itself. Gena thought of her mother somewhere in this sprawling horror of Auschwitz, hopefully alive. She thought of her sisters, her brothers, most of them already taken. She thought of the Krakow apartment of her childhood, the warmth of Friday night candles, the smell of challah baking. A guard shouted, not orders to die but orders to dress, to leave, to live. The gas had not come. A malfunction, a last-minute reprieve. Gena never knew. For the rest of her life, she would call it something else, divine protection. A hand she could not see holding back the angel of death for reasons she would spend decades trying to understand. This is the story of Gena Goldfinger Turgel, survivor of 4 concentration camps, nurse to Anne Frank, the Bride of Belsen, and for 70 years after the war ended, a woman who refused to let hatred have the last word. Gena was born in Krakow, Poland on February 1, 1923, the youngest of 9 children. Her father died when she was small, leaving her mother Estera to run the family textile business. It was a warm, chaotic, loving household, the kind where you always had someone to fight with and someone to defend you. That world ended on September 1, 1939, when Nazi Germany invaded Poland. Gena was 16. The restrictions came quickly, then faster. Jewish businesses seized. Homes confiscated. In 1941, Gena, her mother, and 4 siblings were forced into the Krakow ghetto. They were allowed 1 sack of potatoes, some flour, a few belongings. The keys to their apartment, their family business, their life, all surrendered at gunpoint. They told us if my mother won't deliver them, they will shoot one of my brothers, Gena later recalled. In the ghetto, survival was a daily negotiation with death. Her brother was shot by the SS. Another brother escaped and was never seen again. A sister caught smuggling food into a labor camp was executed. One by one, her family was erased, and Gena could do nothing but watch and remember. From the ghetto, she and her remaining family were sent to Plasso labor camp on the outskirts of Krakow. Then, in the winter of 1944, the Nazis began emptying the camps, marching prisoners westward ahead of the advancing Soviet army. Gena and her mother were forced onto a death march to Auschwitz-Birkenau. The march was a waking nightmare. Those who stumbled were shot. Those who stopped were shot. The snow was red with the blood of the fallen. Gena walked 1 foot in front of the other because to stop was to die, and she was not ready to die, not yet. They arrived at Auschwitz in a state beyond exhaustion. The selection, the shaving, the showers, and then the gas chamber that never killed them. In her testimony to the USC Shoah Foundation, Gena recalled arriving at Auschwitz and seeing chimneys smoking, smelling something she could not name but would never forget. She was separated from her mother briefly, then reunited, a small mercy in a place designed to extinguish mercy itself. But Auschwitz was not the end. In January 1945, as the Soviets approached, the Nazis forced prisoners on another death march, this time to Buchenwald in Germany. For 4 weeks, they walked through the frozen countryside, sleeping in barns, in fields, in the open air. Gena's feet bled, her body wasted. Her mind retreated to a small, quiet place where she repeated the same words over and over, I will survive, I will tell. From Buchenwald, they were packed into open cattle cars and sent to Bergen-Belsen in northern Germany. It was February 1945. Gena was 22 years old. Bergen-Belsen was not an extermination camp in the technical sense. There were no gas chambers. But it was a place where people died by the thousands nonetheless from starvation, disease, exposure. When Gena arrived, she saw something that would stay with her forever, walking skeletons, creatures so emaciated they no longer looked human. You could not distinguish whether they were men or women, she said. Bodies lay everywhere, unburied, unmourned. The living shuffled among the dead because there was nowhere else to go. Gena was assigned to work in the camp hospital. It was not a hospital in any real sense, no medicine, no clean water, no bandages, just a wooden barracks where the sick were laid on straw and left to die. But Gena, who had spent her life caring for others, could not simply watch. She began to help. She washed faces. She brought water. She held hands. It was there that she met a 15-year-old girl, listless with typhus, burning with fever. Her face was flushed, her hair disheveled, her eyes distant. She was one of thousands, indistinguishable in the mass of suffering, but Gena noticed her. She washed her face. She gave her water. She sat with her when no one else would. The girl's name was Anne Frank. In interviews later in life, Gena described those moments with a simplicity that made them more powerful. I washed her face, gave her water to drink, and I can still see that face, her hair, and how she looked. She did not know then that Anne would become a symbol, her diary read by millions. She only knew that a child was dying and that she could offer small comforts. Anne Frank died in Bergen-Belsen in March 1945, probably in the first week of the month. She was 15 years old. Gena was there, holding her hand when the world had abandoned her. A month later, on April 15, 1945, British forces liberated Bergen-Belsen. What they found was beyond comprehension: 60,000 prisoners, most of them desperately ill, and 13,000 unburied corpses. The soldiers wept. Some vomited, others simply walked away, unable to process what they had seen. But one soldier walked toward the horror, not away. His name was Norman Turgel, a British Jewish soldier serving with the Intelligence Corps. He was there to help with the liberation, to interview survivors, to document the unimaginable. Gena was still in the camp hospital, still caring for the sick, still refusing to let go of her humanity. Norman saw her. He later said it was love at first sight, not despite what she had been through, but because of who she had become in its aftermath. She was beautiful, he said. Even in that place, she was beautiful. Norman brought her chocolate. He brought her news of the outside world. He brought her something she had not felt in years: hope. 6 months later, in October 1945, they were married in Lübeck, Germany. The ceremony took place in a synagogue that the Nazis had converted into a stable during the war. Jewish locals, overjoyed at the prospect of a wedding, cleaned it out and prepared it for the occasion. It was the most beautiful day, very cold, very sunny, Gena recalled. Her wedding dress was made from a British Army parachute given to her by Norman's fellow soldiers. Silk white, transformed from an instrument of war into a symbol of new life. That dress now resides in London's Imperial War Museum, a testament to love's stubborn persistence in the face of history's darkest hour. Gena Turgel became known as the Bride of Belsen. It was a strange title for a woman who had seen so much death, but she wore it with grace. She had survived, she had loved. She would not let the Nazis claim her future as they had claimed her past. The couple moved to England, where they built a new life. Gena gave birth to 3 children. Norman worked. They were not rich, but they were together, and Gena, for a time, tried to leave the past where it belonged. I didn't spend much time thinking about my experience in the Holocaust, she told the USC Shoah Foundation. On my mind, always I wanted my mother to come over. Then I fell pregnant and I had to cope with that. Then mother came and I had to look after her. There was not time for me to think of my past because I had to think of the time for the future, but the past does not forget, it waits. In 1987, Gena published her memoir, I Light a Candle. The title was deliberate, a reference to the Jewish tradition of lighting candles in memory of the dead and to her own conviction that her survival had a purpose: to bear witness. My story is the story of one survivor, but it is also the story of 6 million who perished, she said at a Holocaust remembrance event in London's Hyde Park in April 2018, just 2 months before her death. Maybe that's why I was spared, so my testimony would serve as a memorial like that candle that I light for the men, women, and children who have no voice. For the next 3 decades, Gena traveled across Britain, speaking in schools, universities, community centers. She spoke to hundreds of thousands of young people. She answered their questions, no matter how difficult. She showed them her tattooed number from Auschwitz. She told them about Anne Frank. She told them about her mother, her siblings, her losses. And she always ended with the same message: hatred is a poison that destroys the hater as surely as the hated. Compassion is the only cure. Karen Pollock, chief executive of the Holocaust Educational Trust, said of Gena, her strength, determination, and resilience were unwavering, her powerful and wise words an inspiration. A shining light has gone out today and will never be replaced. Rabbi Jonathan Sachs called her one of the most remarkable Holocaust survivors I had the privilege of knowing. She was a blessing and an inspiration to our community. London Mayor Sadiq Khan, who met Gena at the April 2018 Remembrance event, said he was inspired by her lifelong commitment to educating people about the horrors of the Holocaust. Gena Turgel died on June 7, 2018 at the age of 95. She was survived by her 3 children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren. Norman had predeceased her in 1995, but her story did not die with her. In the decades after the war, Gena was often asked, "How did you survive? How did you keep your humanity? How did you avoid bitterness?" Her answer was always the same. She would pause, look at the questioner with those eyes that had seen too much, and say, "I chose to live not just physically but as a human being. The Nazis wanted to strip us of our humanity before they killed us. If I had become bitter, if I had let hatred consume me, they would have won. I refused to let them win." She spoke of the small acts of kindness that sustained her. A shared crust of bread, a hand held in the darkness, a word of comfort from a stranger. She spoke of her mother's courage, her siblings' memory. She spoke of Norman, who walked into hell and saw not a victim but a woman to love. And she spoke of Anne Frank, whose face she could still see, whose hair she could still remember, whose hand she had held as the world ended. "I light a candle for her," Gena said, "for all of them, so they are not forgotten." The Imperial War Museum in London displays Gena's wedding dress made from that British Army parachute. It hangs behind glass, white and luminous, a relic of a love story that should not have been possible. Visitors pause before it, reading the placard, trying to comprehend the journey from Auschwitz to that October day in Lübeck. But the dress is not the only memorial. Gena's real legacy lives in the hundreds of thousands of young people who heard her speak, who sat in auditoriums and classrooms, sometimes restless at first, then slowly quieting as her words took hold. They will grow up and have children of their own, and some of them will tell those children about the woman who survived 4 camps and chose to teach instead of hate. That is how memory survives. That is how the dead are honored. That is how the candle stays lit. In the winter of 1944, Gena Goldfinger stood naked in a gas chamber and waited to die. She did not know why the gas never came, she never knew, but she spent the rest of her life answering that question the only way she could, by living fully, loving deeply, and speaking truthfully. "Maybe that's why I was spared," she said, "so my testimony would serve as a memorial." She lit that candle for 70 years, it is still burning. In her final public appearance 2 months before her death, Gena sat in a wheelchair in Hyde Park, a blanket over her knees, and addressed a crowd gathered for Holocaust Memorial Day. Her voice was frail but steady, her eyes still sharp. "Let us hope for a better future where anti-Semitism and all hatred should be demolished, shouldn't be tolerated," she said. "And I do beg you, don't forget those who are less fortunate than yourselves." Then she was wheeled away, back into the quiet of her remaining days. But the words lingered, they always did. If this story of survival, love, and the triumph of compassion moved you, like this video and subscribe to Unbound Stories SR for more powerful documentaries about extraordinary lives. In the comments, share someone whose story of resilience has inspired you.